Today on Two Decent Blokes.
Are you saying you don't think the racism that people have been pointing out exists?
No.
Woke racism, how a new religion has betrayed Black America, please.
Is it new though?
It's now very clear that it's a religion now.
It's not that I don't think it's pretty or something. I don't think it's going to work.
But like Whoopie was your auntie, she would be cool. My thing is...
Probably change families.
So, silence is violence. So,
This is also another false dichotomy, because if they say silence is violence, right, they're encouraging people who agree with them to speak up. When they say elevate Black voices, they're trying to manage the voices that they don't like to remain silent.
racism does exist.
Okay.
And call me a cynic. I'm not sure how much we can completely eliminate it.
Right off the bat comes an assumption that criticism or criticizing the entire anti-racism movement is denying the existence of racism in America.
You said before that we need to embrace our white guilt. Didn't you say that, or did I miss
No.
it?
When these people say white guilt, which white people are they referring to? And on top of that, there's this assumption that if you're white, you have to think this way. And if you are Black, you have to think this way.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
So from critical race theory to court cases to Capitol Hill, racism seems to be a constant hot topic in America. But Columbia professor John McWhorter claims that modern anti-racist movement has lost its way and is harming the country in his new book, Woke Racism, How a New Religion Has Betrayed Black America. Please welcome New York Times
New religion.
author John McWhorter.
I like the title.
I know. He really put it in the right like presentation.
But also-
everybody understands it.
Is it new though? I mean, it's been happening for at least 100 years.
It's now very clear that it's a religion now.
Or maybe we're old enough to notice it.
Well, I guess so.
So, John, you take issue with what you call the third wave anti-racism. Can you explain to people what exactly that means?
Yeah, I can. First wave anti-racism is get rid of segregation and get Black people to vote. That made sense. Second wave anti-racism wasn't heralded in the air, but it's in the 70s and the 80s, and white America learns that it's bad to be a racist person in general. A lot of that was happening then, and nothing was perfect, but lessons were learned. These days, there's this new way. And the new idea is that to get past what we need to get past, we need to teach non-Black America that they are complicit in an abstract sense in a racism that's all around us. And that until you understand that complicitness and feel a certain guilt for your white privilege and realize that that stain will never leave you.
And this book just comes out just now when this CRT stuff has really just started. It's perfect timing. I think he's going to make a lot of money with this book.
I also think that's what he was trying to say when he's saying, they should be taught, like it's a psychological, change. So I think he is referring to that without mentioning it for some reason.
Then Black America can't get forward. And my issue is just that I think Black America can get forward without that grand psychological experiment, which it's not that I don't think it's pretty or something. I don't think it's going to work. And there are too many people who really need help for us to indulge in that third wave. That's my problem with it.
So I just want to make sure I understand. So are you saying you don't think the racism that people have been pointing out exists?
No.
Oh my
Whoopie,
goodness.
you are so sweet. Well,
She's not sweet. Don't give her that.
Well, she is sweet. Like, I mean, if
She's
there
a good
was,
actress, so.
yeah, well, there's that. But like, Whoopie was your auntie, she would be cool. But anyway, my thing is
Probably change families.
so you can tell right off the bat comes an assumption that criticism or criticizing the entire anti-racism movement is denying the existence of racism in America. And I think she can perfectly hear him and hear what he was saying. And it shows you a fallacy that she's already engaging in. That, if you voice your criticism towards anti-racism, then you're already not just talking from a perspective of there could be something else motivating you, but you are already saying there is nothing. It's either it's there or it's not there. There's no in between. And that's almost like a false dichotomy as a logical fallacy, where all the other like alternatives to why you would be asking or what you would be saying is maybe there's racism, which is like exactly what he just said. But it's to a different degree than to say it's not there at all, which I don't think everybody.
She's also strawmanning him.
Exactly. Yeah, there's that too. And it's usually done. So every time you're talking to people about these issues, watch out for some of these logical fallacies.
Racism does exist, and call me a cynic. I'm not sure how much we can completely eliminate it. And this is the thing. I think that Black Americans can succeed despite the fact that non-Black people are psychologically imperfect. My main interest is in what we can do to move ahead and to finish the job. And I'm not saying racism is okay, and I'm not saying there's no such thing as systemic racism. I'm saying that focusing on teaching America lessons about that isn't necessary to creating happier Black lives.
John, I think many people struggle with how to talk about race these days, and you describe a catechism of contradictions that illustrates just how confusing these messages can be. Can you give us some examples and any advice for people who want to have more productive conversations about race?
Well, if you have something that doesn't make any sense, you have to call it out. And I hate to say that that's true even when you're thinking about racism. So silence is violence. So,
what do you have to say about that point then?
Yeah, he's right. I didn't like the fact that he said call it out because, hey, that word is being used by the wrong people. But you see, this is also another false dichotomy. What is really happening here is you hear in most of these crusades, there is this saying, silence is violence, right? And at the same time, within those same groups, they also say you have to elevate, to amplify Black voices, which means if you are not Black, you are not supposed to speak, or at least speak, ahead of a Black person about race things and race-related issues. So
speak in agreement to us or don't speak at all.
Yeah. So in the same line of thought, white people or other people are being encouraged to be silent and to speak at the same time. But you understand that the inconsistency in that is not even more glaring. What is more glaring is there is a strong need to control and to silence speech in general, speech that they disagree with. So is this heads I win, tail you lose? Because if they say silence is violence, right, they're encouraging people who agree with them to speak up. When they say elevate Black voices, they're trying to manage the voices that they don't like to remain silent. So double-edged sword, but
so you're supposed to say something. And silence and violence rhyme. So silence, sort of. Silence is violence, okay. But then on the other hand, don't elevate Black voices over yours. Don't talk too much. Where's the happy medium? If you don't date Black people, you're probably a racist. If you do date Black people, you need to consider that you might be a racist because you might be exotifying Black people. What do you do with that? You can keep going with that sort of thing.
Look at Joy's face.
That sort of thing. We call it the race thing. And everybody kind of looks over each other's shoulders and talks about how complicated it is. I'm not sure what the point of that is. There are people out in the world who are suffering. We need policy. We need pragmatic solutions, not these abstract conversations that are more about feeling guilty, teaching people to be guilty, virtue signaling. All of that to me is recreation. We need to get back to what the civil rights leaders 50 years ago were doing.
But you said before that we need to embrace our white guilt. Didn't you say that, or did I miss it?
No.
And Joy comes in.
So you said it before that we need to embrace our white guilt. I don't really know entirely what she was accusing him of, like of contradicting himself, I guess. But at the same time, when these people say white guilt, which white people are they referring to? That's what I'm interested in. Because most of their language is this vague cataclysm where there is a non-specificity that is almost
Generalizes
designed.
too much.
Yes. So it's a logical fallacy of generalization.
Overgeneralization.
So there is nothing specific. Is she talking about Russians, Greeks? Is she talking about the Irish or the Welsh? I'm assuming she's talking about white Americans, right? But which white Americans? Is she because most white Americans arrived in the United States when slavery was already taking place or when it ended. So should they feel guilty also about what happened during slavery? So you see that when they say white people, it's almost like everyone agrees that, yeah, white people. Which white people? Which white people are you talking about? Austrians they were not involved in American slavery. Should they also feel guilty because they are white? What about when they say like black people? Usually when they're referring to black Americans, does that include Jamaicans and Africans?
And does that include the black people that owned slaves themselves?
Yeah.
In the South?
So on top of that, they qualify everything based on race. And on top of that, there's this assumption that if you're white, you have to think this way. And if you are black, you have to think this way.
Wow.
You can have white guilt, and that's just fine. And there it goes.
White
you
guilt.
need not worry whether you're guilty enough, because frankly,
That's another thing. Actually, we probably didn't discuss this. It's called an appeal to emotion as a logical fallacy. Listen to the words white guilt. And this is why we start talking about these issues as it's almost like a religion.
Yeah. And also, if you are white and you feel guilty about what happened in the past, right? What good does that do to you, for you, and also to the people that you are supposedly feeling bad for? What good does that do? It doesn't change anything. It just brings some emotional satisfaction, so you feel emotionally superior to other people for feeling bad.
You see, that's how you end up with people acting out some of these fallacies now and some of these absurd perspectives as if you see a black person, go and kneel to them and ask for forgiveness.
Like a religion. Religion.
Just like a religion.
And the other thing is, it's called white guilt. Is the assumption that black people's ancestors never did anything bad to feel guilty about? Because in reality, if we are going to feel guilty about whatever our ancestors did, then every single human being should feel guilty, because back in your lineage, I'll be confident to track back one of your ancestors who did some heinous thing against another person.
Yeah. Let's keep going.
even if you weren't terribly guilty at all, look what happened in the 1960s. I don't get this idea that we need to have this grand teach-in about the depths and the significance of white guilt and complicity before black people get help. I just think that we strayed from what civil rights was supposed to be about.
So change the system.
Yeah, the system should be changed.
Right.
And I don't think that these psychological teach-ins are necessary to that changing of the system. I think we get caught up in something that's frankly kind of easy. Kind of like the past stuff from Twitter is easy.
Can you pause it a little bit? I have a very strong feeling that Joy and John are talking about the different system.
Yep.
Change the system. I would have wanted to ask, which system are you talking about that needs changing, and who is supposed to change it?
I feel for him. I think he's trying to finish a thought and she's coming in there. So he has to make a choice. Do I keep going with my point? Do I actually stop and start asking these questions like the one you just raised up?
With limited time.
And he decided, let me just keep going.
Okay.
On Twitter, you look at people yelling at each other. Frankly, I have guiltily participated in some of it during the pandemic when I got bored. But that sort of thing is not necessary to working in the real world and solving the real problems that real black people have.
And I think that that's part of why it's gained so much popularity. In the book, you talk about
because we're in order. So let me get to Sunny.
Why she do her like that though? Why?
Yeah, she kind of snubbed it. But well, she's the one who chose to be on The View. It's not our fault.
I would like to see how these interactions go, because to be honest, at the end of okay, I'm not gonna really try to spill, but she didn't actually get to ask a question.
Yeah, she didn't. Maybe it went to a commercial and she came back. She said something.
Probably came back.
But Meghan McCain complained, like in her new book, she was complaining about how she was treated, not just because of her conservative views on this show, but just that the environment is very toxic. So
Yeah, you put
this is
some
an insight.
Yeah.
Well, so there are systems that need to be changed, and you've said there is racism. But in 2008, on a Forbes article, you wrote that
Okay, bring out
We
the
can't
files
call
and the
ourselves-
receipts.
You see, when a woman does this, for all you guys out there in relationships, when you see a woman
You
go
say
back
that.
into her archives, going back, this could easily be just be
Bring
like
the
her,
receipts.
she's bringing receipts. She could be going into it, but you say, I would just advise, just run away. This is not cool.
post-racial country, and you said that America is past racism against Black people. But then in this
But
book,
then you did
you
say-
write that anti-racism is a religion.
Last Friday, you said you was going to the movies, but your Snapchat says you were at the mall.
As if you
What
can go to the movies, then to the mall later.
You just know something's about to start.
Given that
but-
the Attorney General, the FBI,
Sorry, what did you want to say?
Some of you guys will be lying to these females. That's why they need to bring receipts.
Let's keep moving.
Director and Homeland Security Secretary all said this summer that the biggest domestic terror threat in this country is from white supremacy.
Oh, God.
Do you
Okay.
believe that racism?
God. You want to take that? Are you supposed to take that? Because I don't think I want to.
So, first of all, she is trying to say that you are a liar. She's looking at him and saying that in 2008, you said this thing that is supposedly contradicting what you are saying now. Because during that article, he supposedly, allegedly, said that America is post-racism. I don't think he meant that there is no racism, because only a moron could actually say
She's
that. But
strawmanning him.
Yeah, she's strawmanning
She's
him to say
also
that, oh,
Putting a
at
false
one
analogy.
Yes. So at one point you said there is no racism in America, and now you are saying that racism, woke racism, is a religion. So what are you really saying? Especially when the FBI and the president and the Homeland Security said that there is the biggest domestic terror is from white supremacy, which is a racist organization. So what do you have to say about that? First of all, right? I'm sure that she knows that he didn't mean that there's no racism. Nobody would ever believe that racism will always be there. So she's lying, and she's acting like she doesn't understand. And the second thing is she is citing sources that are irrelevant to this conversation. The fact that the Secretary of Homeland Security said something does not make
They're
it
relevant,
true.
but they could be biased.
Yeah. Does not make it true, because the Secretary of Homeland Security is a partisan post. They were given that position by the president, who is a Democrat, who has a certain philosophy and a certain vision of what he wants to be believed. So it's not fact, it's not statistics. It's just something that an organization said. But she's mentioning it to legitimize her point. But they often do this to cite statistics that have nothing to do with the actual issue as a way to buttress their invalid points.
She's trying to argue from authority.
Yeah.
And just the sad thing that it's not really the right authority she's using.
Racism then is also a religion, and that we're honestly living in a post-racial society. Like what is your, since you're against anti-racism training and policies, what is your solve?
Well, remember, I'm not against anti-racism. It's not that I'm in favor of racism. I mean, the detour that we've gone into now. But I'm glad you bring up the Forbes piece, because that comes up a lot. That was a while ago. There was a sexy headline that, the people who do these magazines and newspapers, they give it the title. What I was saying there was that Barack Obama's election proved that racism isn't what it used to be. And I will openly own that what I meant then, because I mean it now, is that racism, although it's a bad thing, although we must tamp it down, is not as conclusive an obstacle to Black success as we often say. That's what
you said. Our proper concern is not whether racism still exists, but whether it remains a serious problem. And you said the election of Obama proved that it no longer does.
That's what I meant. Yeah, I meant that it shows that the country is not so high-bound bigoted as it used to be, and that if that man can be elected president, remember then it happened again, and with more competition. I was saying that, yes, racism exists, but that is not the necessary prelude to making a difference in real life.
So she knew what he was saying.
Yeah. Here's one thing that I'll point out to our viewers out there. You can very clearly see that none of these women have read that book, first of all. And that article she's referring to in Forbes magazine, she didn't read that article. She has some assistant who makes up questions for her, and she reads them and she asks these questions. That is why when, like Whoopie in the beginning was asking, are you saying that there is no racism? Nobody in their right mind will ever say that. And the reason why most of their arguments are straw men, because they are already pre-packaged. They are talking points, things that they would ask a similar person who is saying similar things. But if they would really engage these ideas faithfully and try to really understand what is being said, maybe there will be salvation for them after all. But they never do. They're not interested because it's a distraction to their worldview. It's almost like saying to someone that the God you are worshiping is dead. It's a heresy.
It's just not something that someone will easily be able to conceptualize and look at you objectively, without really actually already looking at you as either evil or just complicit in whatever they think is going on. But I would like to conclude this way. I like these kinds of conversations. I wish they would actually happen a lot more. What John McWhorter was basically saying at the end of it is what we care about is progress and things that help Black people. And that's what we should put more time and effort in. But I think we are not in agreement as to what those things are. And it's important so that we come to the table and say, when you go and say, well, we need to defund the police, it sounds good in that time, and all these other things. In what way does it actually really help people? And even talking about, these issues the way we do right now, is it even really helping, or it's just a giant waste of time? And it's what's easy.
Yeah, I'll say this. I don't know if this will make it in the cut, but every single policy that is being touted up to the Black community in America has been tried somewhere else in the world. People have hyped the race over everything. People have hyped their cultures. They have tried to, put minority rights at the forefront, diversity quotas. They happened in India. They happened in Singapore. They happened in Africa. Land distribution happened everywhere around the world. Every single thing that they are advocating for Black lives in America has been tried
somewhere. Yeah.
And it failed, which brings me to wonder, why do they keep trying to try these things? Don't they see the results are glaring? Maybe it's time for us to find a new solution. And John seems to have a better one.
Yeah, that's the topic for today. What do you think? Do you agree with John that we need to pay attention a lot more to policies and things that actually change people's lives rather than talk about abstract things or just big things like, there is white guilt and everybody needs to learn this stuff in school when it necessarily doesn't really help Black people that need help right now somewhere. Subscribe to the channel. Let us know what you think and have a good day.